been a month, you'll remember, since the Marshalltown fire, which claimed the lives of 77 people. Most of the victims included South Africans and foreign nationals who lost their identity documents, those at least who survived. Now, Mzansi is calling on the city of Johannesburg and the provincial authorities to start providing victims with proper documentation. Mzansi's Civic Alliance coordinator is Irfaan Mangera, who joins us in studio. Good morning to you, sir, and thank you very much for coming in. We're going to touch on what's going on in the CBD this morning through Operation Chanela. But let's kick off the conversation about that Marshalltown fire. Yeah. What are your major concerns there? You have been speaking as to what has not been fulfilled.
Thank you so much. Good morning to you and everyone watching. I think it's more than just speaking we were doing. I've been on the ground for the last 4 weeks, working with a number of different people there who have either been the victims of this fire or are trying to support many families and many individuals who are affected by what's the crisis unfolding in the city of Johannesburg. Yeah. We had put out a statement last weekend because it's been a month, and our big concern is that these innocent people, these people who are now sheltering in a recreation center which is indignified, are being left to their own devices. There's been little to no support from government, and we are saying that there's a responsibility on government to actually provide care and support to people affected by this fire. And currently we're asking for more transparency around what has been provided, hospitalizations, support as far as food, burn victims, support as far as psychological support. This is a traumatic experience.
It's quite strange that you're painting a picture of people, victims of that fire, at least the survivors, who were moved elsewhere, but there is no provision of help, which was promised, because this was a very big story. The president descended onto that scene, and lots of promises were made.
Absolutely.
Are you telling us that those people are subjected to essentially just fending for themselves without any sort of help?
You know, the harrowing thing was that all the politicians who ran there to the fire to speak boldly about this crisis did little after that to say, okay, how do we help the people who are affected by it? How do we be people-centric in our approach? And yes, the first week or so you saw government service descend and people were able to provide immediate support for the first sort of 72 hours. Since then, the people in the room, and let me paint this picture for you. Sure. There's 100 men sleeping in a recreation center. That's probably just the size of this room that we're in. On the floor over each other because there's no space. These are 100 men in a recreation center where ablution facilities are not able to cater for that amount of people. This is not a living space. There are 30-odd women in another part of the center with a couple of children as well. There was a mother who gave birth in this period, as there's been no provision of nappies or the type of support an infant requires. And so for the last 3 weeks, NGOs, and the narrative had been NGOs are the problem here. And yet NGOs are the ones who are providing relief, who are saying we're coming together to give food, to give clothing, blankets, and so on, so that we can actually make sure it's not as bad as what's currently the existence there.
You've also pointed to an inquiry that was promised by the premier of this province. What exactly is your problem regarding that?
The inquiry has not even started. This is a month later. We don't even know where this fire started. What is there's now all of a sudden stories picking up that no, this was just a by the way thing. Others then throw in, no, maybe this was actually arson. And so we're actually worried that so long has spent not actually investigating what is the problem. So this commission was supposed to start last week on the 1st of October.
That's what I was about to ask you, to say, remind the viewers when the Premier, Panyaza Lesufi, said this inquiry would start. It was?
It was weeks back, at least 2-3 weeks ago. And yet, nothing has started yet. And for an emergency like this, a crisis and disaster like this, you expect better from our officials. And this is partly the crisis that Rise Mzansi is trying to deal with, is saying governance has completely collapsed. The quality of leadership in this country at all levels, because you'd see in my statement, I don't just say the city of Johannesburg, but it's provincial and national, because they all went to say, you know, we must care, we're worried about the situation. And yet, 4 weeks later, what has been done? That's our question. What has been done?
And you speak about governance. This morning, you have the president launching the Border Management Authority in Limpopo that talks to immigration. In downtown Johannesburg, the police are mounting Operation Shanela. This is a crime campaign, right? Talk to us about what is it that your party thinks can do better, because you're pointing to governance, and these are issues now that affect individual human beings on the ground. What needs to be done to change what has been described just before we went into the conversation with you? Hijacked buildings, petty crime, the filth, but also importantly, visible policing.
Yeah. You know, one of the big crises in the city, and you mentioned hijacked buildings, is that yes, there is criminality, but who are the criminals? You found there was a link between some politicians and the big shots who actually abuse and exploit working class families, families who are looking for shelter, looking for a dignified place to sleep every day. People come to the city from all over the continent, not just the country, to find work, to actually forward their lives. The crisis that we're dealing with is a crisis really of housing, of governance, of the fact that we've not built adequate housing in the last 10, 20 years in the city. There are people I know personally, since RDP was launched, has not received an RDP home, and he's been living in the city forever. He's almost 78 now. This is a gentleman who served his whole life, who's worked, and he's now at the point where he's like, I need to stop working, but I also don't know what to do because I don't have a house. So we literally all seeing this unfold before us, the criminality, but also the fact that collectively we don't have leadership saying this is the vision out. Rise is saying we have to bring in every partner. And I'm glad that there's been lots of movement within the civic space. And I know on the 7th of this weekend, in fact, on Saturday, the Kathrada Foundation is hosting a number of organizations from civil society to convene around this very issue to say, we are watching this happen. What is our pushback against the political players who are in positions of power, who are only there to occupy position, but not to actually deal with what their role is and responsibility is?
What you've just said actually reminds me of at least one of the political parties that are represented in Parliament. You are not yet there. And this is your chance to try and, I suppose, convince South Africans that you are probably going to do better than what we have seen. But the EFF has at least taught us that you can be in the opposition but still be effective. Maybe you might call it PR, but sometimes there are things that we can point to say, yes, they did say that they would do this, and it has happened.
100%. I think we aren't represented anyway. We launched 5 months ago. But Rise has been launched because we find that the current menu of parties don't represent a broad majority of this country, who are actually finding themselves outside of democratic process. What I mean is that, for example, 14 million young people are not voting. 14 million young people who are saying, we're not convinced that you actually can solve these problems. And so we're trying to build a new movement and a new party that actually deals with the issues and provides the solutions. We think we need new answers, and that's why this weekend we'll be convening in Johannesburg for our conference, our People's Convention, and we'll be bringing together almost 800 delegates from around this country to say, how do we fix these issues? How do we put forward a plan that will take us from what we're currently seeing so that the quality of governance and leadership in the next term of office is far better. And if it means we're occupying benches on the side, that we are in opposition, we will still do that and make sure we hold accountable anyone who's in a position of power and influence.
Final question to you. yes, you are not yet in the political space, effectively because no one has voted for you yet. The elections are coming. But what is it that you can do right now, though? Because it is incredible what you've just said, that these people were promised services when they were moved out of that building, which was hijacked, by the way. And who did it belong to? It belonged to the city of Johannesburg.
Yes.
So what is it that you can do to put pressure on people that come to such platforms as mine and say, no, we're doing stuff about helping those people, and here you come saying the people are left to their devices?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the clear demand is ensuring that those are the people who have been affected, at minimum in the immediate week, to provide the temporary documents they need, because the police have arrested a few of those people who have been affected. And arresting knowing that they're part of this fire, and so you are re-traumatizing people who have been in a very traumatic experience. And it's not just to the South African government. I think the consulates and various embassies equally have a responsibility to say their documents, they are here legally, people have been part of this, and they actually have a right to continue, and you can't arrest them. That's the problem we're having. DNA and identification is another issue. There's not been communication on what's happening there. Another thing is that a lot of South Africans have been affected by this. So the narrative that this is just a migrant issue is actually incorrect. There's a family from the Eastern Cape, for example, a young daughter who refused to jump off the building because she was afraid, had passed and perished in this fire. They can't actually take the body back to the Eastern Cape because there's not enough resources or funds to provide for that. So I think it's challenging the untruths that are emerging from the kind of populist rhetoric we're seeing emerging from politicians, but also from people who are trying to stoke flames, rather than say, how do we solve for these issues that are on, or rather happening in front of us.
All right. Irfaan, Mangera, let me thank you very much for your time.